Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful people from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very senior professional from Toronto, Canada, Mr. Alykhan Jetha, or AJ. AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
AJ is the CEO of MarketCircle Inc., the company behind Daylite, which is the award-winning Mac CRM empowering small business owners, entrepreneurs, and bootstrapping builders across the globe. So, AJ, before I get into MarketCircle, you had an amazing journey from Congo to Canada.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your journey and some of your learnings.
So this happened in 1974. So I was 5 years old at the time, and we got expelled from the Congo. Back then it was called Zaire.
Yeah.
We got expelled, and with nothing on our, other than the clothes on our backs. We landed in Brussels. Then from Brussels, couple months or so later, maybe 2 months later, we landed in Toronto, Canada. Then a couple months later, unfortunately, my father passed away. So then so it was my mom, who had never really worked other than helping him in the shops, and my two sisters. And so that was the beginning of the interesting journey.
Wow. And then you went on to study, and did you work for some companies, or did you start off on your own?
So I actually didn't do well in school. In high school, I didn't do that great. Then I got to university somehow. I don't know exactly how I got into university. In university, I actually failed the first year. Now, how can somebody actually fail university in the first year, especially at university? What it basically kind of showed or illustrated was that if I'm not interested, I'm really not interested, and I don't care, right? And so then from that, what happened was I learned that I'm not a book learner or an academic kind of thing. I need to have my hands on, and I got to do stuff. So I enrolled at Seneca College, which is a college where you actually did things with your hands. We would play with circuit boards and wire them and so forth, and I actually excelled over there. And it was also co-op, which was great because then I could actually earn some money in the summers to be able to afford the winters. Well, not the summers. Every 4 months 4 months you're at school, 4 months you're working, 4 months you're school. And I tell all the kids, like, if you can find a co-op program, that's what you should, because even if you don't find what you like, you will find what you don't like, which is a big help sometimes.
Very interesting and great advice. So let's move to MarketCircle. Tell me about this venture and what led you to develop something which is such a global product.
So MarketCircle, the way you see it today, is not how we started. We started as a .com. The idea behind that, and I think you will appreciate this, is that I was at the time watching a documentary on eBay, and they were talking about auctions and so forth, right? And I was like, man, who in business does auctions? Normally, you will have a price, I'll have a price, we'll negotiate, and we'll come to an agreement and be done with it and move on, right? And so what we built is a site where you could put a product up, you can have an asking price, and then you can negotiate a price between buyer and seller. And you could also request a service as well for a certain price. And so we built that system. We had it working. We tried to raise some money. So went through the whole VC kind of things, and it was very interesting. So at the time in Canada, we're still very conservative financially.
Yeah.
So it was difficult for me to find money here. So one way or another, I got to the US. And one VC gave me a chance. He said, okay, come and do your presentation. You have 15 minutes. I got there, and he said, oh, that's actually not a bad idea. If you can convince this other fellow, I'm going to be in for a little bit of money. So I said, okay, set me up. So he sets me up, and I go and talk to that person, and that person says, that's not a bad idea. if you can convince so and so, I'm in for some money too. I said, okay, set me up. And by that time, I'd gotten to Draper Fisher Jewison, which was the top of the top
Mm-hmm.
creme de la creme VCs at that time. By the time I got there, which was May 2000, I got there and it was a very tense environment. And so I got to sit down in the reception. Then, I was sent to the boardroom. I sit in the boardroom. I see one of the senior execs. I think it was Mr. Jewison Sr. And, he was on the phone. You could see through the glass. And it was like he was not in a happy place. And he was visibly very upset. So he comes out of his office, turns the corner, like through the glass wall is right here. He comes across and he says, "You have 1 minute." I'm supposed to have 15 minutes, right? So I'm like, what? 1 minute? How am I going to do my presentation in 1 minute? And then his receptionist knocks on the door again and says something. So he said, "I'll be right back." He goes, picks up his phone. Again, he's quite animated. Comes back, he goes, "You're up."
Okay.
So I never actually got to do the presentation. And if you recall, you might recall, May 2000 is when the .com bubble
burst. I know.
So got back home and we had the choice of either closing the company up. We had some friends and family money that we used to build the system, or do consulting and pay back the friends and family. So my current COO, Mike, and I decided that let's do the ethical right thing, do consulting and pay them back. So that's what we did. So we became a consulting firm with custom work, custom development work. Then we were making a product for ourselves because I was losing sales all the time. I was losing track of what sales opportunities I had. I was losing track of where I was in the sales opportunity. So we had to either go switch to PC, use one of the softwares that would allow us to help us manage that, or do something of our own on the Mac. So we decided to do something of our own on the Mac. And that's how Daylite was born. So Daylite itself was born out of our necessity. Then after a little while, Apple got wind of it and said, you should sell this thing. I go, well, we didn't make it for selling. Goes, it doesn't matter. You should sell it. And, you should sell it. Make sure that it's available by April 1st, 2002. I go, April 1st? He goes, yeah, don't ask questions. Just make sure it's ready by April and do a good job. Basically, they'd already seen what it was working. So, we scrambled, 3 months of like 24/7 work or 27, like not necessarily 24, but we did long hours. And we got an Apple Design Award for our product, and that kind of launched the Daylite product. We were still doing consulting at the time because it wasn't enough revenue to offset. But then in 2007, we switched to being a completely product company. And then in 2016, we became a SaaS company. Since we took the Daylite platform and we migrated it to a web-backed, still native clients on iPhone, iPad, and Mac, but back end you didn't need a server anymore and all that kind of stuff. So that's how
fascinating
MarketCircle came to be where it's at today.
Incredible. And next question is that what does Daylite do, and how do you support so many small entrepreneurs?
So I think one of the decisions we made early on was we were hearing a lot about CRM failures at that time. And when I kind of dug into it, like, why were they failing Siebel and all these things? People would spend millions of dollars implementing it, and then it would fail. And I go, what would they fail? Well, I found out that it was the fact that management wanted the data, but the users that are actually doing the sales or the work didn't want to use that system and never put the data in. So then it was like, it's garbage in, garbage out, or nothing in, nothing out, right? So then we thought about that a little bit, and we said, that's interesting. Why don't we start with the productivity part first, layer on some CRM on top of that? So that's exactly what we did. So, we got like proper calendar, we got proper task management, we got all that kind of stuff that every day you would be using the software because it's part of your productivity suite. And in that process, you don't have multiple different systems. You have the history, the call history. Inside you have the opportunity, and the opportunity is linked to the contact or the appointment or the task, and so it's all interlinked. And so now what was happening is these small business people were actually using the application and getting something out of it. And that's, I think, what separates us. Also, we're a native application with offline data. But I think that's one of the reasons that we're different than the others.
Fascinating. So, AJ, I'm now going to move to some more generic questions on startups, because a lot of our viewers and listeners are startup founders or are aspirational founders, and you seem to have got lots of things right, and I'm sure you made lots of mistakes as well.
Oh yeah, lots of mistakes.
But let me start by asking you, what are some of the important qualities, in your view, that a startup founder should have?
So, this is a very good question. I was like, okay, let me, so I actually wrote some answers. Let me just make sure I remember them. So one of the things was belief that you will figure it out. So what happens is, as we start a new business, like I didn't know what I was doing. I really didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing sometimes, and so you have to have belief in that you'll somehow figure it out, which means that, you'll see a problem and you'll tackle it. You'll ask for advice. You'll be humble enough to ask anybody for advice.
Correct.
And then you'll put all that together, and then you'll make a decision. So if you don't have belief that you'll figure it out, you will run into many roadblocks, and you'll be deflated because you'll say, well, I hit the wall here, and what am I going to do? So that happened many, many times. So that, I think, is the number one trait. Belief that you'll figure out somehow. Right?
Fantastic.
The other one is a thirst for solving problems, because you will run into many problems. Again, it's kind of related to the first. And by a thirst of solving problems, you'll solve problems for the customer, which they're willing to pay you for. That's one thing. But then but that's really secondary to actually running a business in terms of how do you run your business, right? And then and having a few people that you can that you trust, that have some kind of knowledge in your domain, or that are that have some businesses that you can go to and ask them and say, I'm running into this kind of problem. What do you think, or what would you advise, or whatever, right? Like you would get some, like a little nugget, and then you dig into that nugget, and you may find your solution.
Wonderful.
So be willing to ask for, being willing to share the fact that you have this embarrassing problem, which sometimes they are embarrassing.
Correct.
And then and then get some advice on it, and then dig into it.
And the converse of that question is, what, in your opinion, are some of the basic mistakes a lot of startup entrepreneurs make?
So another very good question. Let me just forward here. So having the wrong people in the wrong seats, or having the wrong people, right? I think what happens is you try and get anybody to help you because you're kind of scrambling, you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Correct.
And sometimes you end up picking good people, and sometimes you end up picking not good people, right? And I've been lucky enough that I picked some good people, but there were some not good people. And then you have to have the courage to let those people go, because they're either don't match your core values, or they they're just toxic to the environment, or they're very negative, and so you want to be able to get rid of those people. The other one is having people whose core values, so this is a mistake, right? Having people whose core values are different than yours. So let's take an example. Like, let's say that you're a very ethical person, that you say something, you're going to do it, versus you got some people that are ethics is not their forte or whatever. So what's going to happen is there's always going to be conflict between how you feel you should solve a problem and how they feel the problem should be solved. And there'll be like lots of headbutting.
Yep.
And that's because their core values don't align to yours and causes friction. So that's another mistake, you know, I made that mistake myself. The other one is not managing cash flow carefully. I've seen many startups pour, for example, all their money into marketing and advertising when the product is not ready, or when they don't have a repeatable sales process, or those kinds of things. And then you're depleted of cash. And what are you going to do? You either have to go beg for more, which values your position, or if they don't give you, you got to fold up.
Yep.
Right. And I've run across that many times. And another one is losing belief in yourself. And so what can happen there is, you know, you're working, you know, you hit one wall, you hit another wall, you hit another wall, you know, like, and finally you like, you know, you kind of fall on the floor, and you need you know, maybe this could be your spouse, maybe this could be a brother or a sister or a parent, where they, you know, they recognize and pick you up and say, hey, it's gonna be all right. You'll figure this out, you know, take you out of it, kind of thing, right? So you need that kind of, you know, because as a entrepreneur, you'll be working hard, right? And if you don't manage that side of it, you'll fall on your face and you won't get up, and that's no good.
Very good, very great response. Thank you. So, you know, you just told me about your experience in raising money and going from one VC to another.
Yeah,
I'd love to get your perspective on this $1 million question. Should one bootstrap as long as possible, or should one raise money whenever it's available?
That's a very good question. My preference is bootstrapping, and let me explain why. There's a reason for it. Especially if you are new to the whole running a business and, you know, making mistakes and all that, because you don't have the experience. Now, if you had the experience of running a business, you're a little older, you've gone through the gauntlet, you know how to read financial statements, you understand all that kind of stuff, then it might be, you know, then you can maybe pull, and then you know how to evaluate good people versus bad people, good fit versus bad fit. You know, you have the courage to kick out the ones that aren't. You know, if you're like that, then it might make sense to go raise some money. However, if you're not like that, like me, you know, I think you need time. And if you go raise money, then you won't have the time, because they have a parameter. If I'm going to put X number of dollars in, I want X number of dollars out in these many years. And if you're not on that track, you're gone. So for me, for example, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? And I did try to raise money, actually, even after, and I never, you know, nobody ever gave me money. Even the banks give me, you know, as successful as the business is today, with thousands of customers around the world, with recurring revenue, stable revenue. If I go to the bank, they're still giving me problems to, you know, like extend their line of credit or whatever. It's like, what do I have to do? So I've developed like, you know what, I don't need you, right? I'll do this out of cash flow. So I think that if you are inexperienced, then you need to buy yourself time. If you're experienced, then maybe you can go there, get that one, because you have you know how to do all the things that a new entrepreneur would not know.
Wonderful. I have time for one more question, and AJ, this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your incredible journey from Congo to Canada, from your .com to MarketCircle, to going to the US to try to raise money, to building a global brand, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your learnings and from our conversation?
Another very good question. I love your questions. So the three takeaways from what are the 3 lessons? Where I did answer this question. Where is it here? So the 3 things are, number 1 is realizing that other entrepreneurs that have made it are just like you. They're humans just like you.
Yeah.
They've made the same mistakes
Mm.
you're going to make.
Yeah.
And if it's not this one entrepreneur, it's another one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there is sometimes a feeling that, I don't know what I'm doing, and this guy was successful. He had all the chips on it. And so the thing that I tell many people is that, look, these are just normal people, and don't like put them on a pedestal or anything like that, because you can figure it out. You just got to have that belief to figure it out.
Correct.
Have the courage maybe to ask them. And so that's the one thing I would like people to take away, is that these entrepreneurs are just people like you and me.
Correct.
They the same issues and whatnot, and it's okay. They've made mistakes, and you'll make mistakes.
Absolutely.
And don't beat yourself up on it. Just learn from the mistake. Oh, that's right. That was it. Learn from the mistake. Don't dwell on it. Move on.
Well said.
So it's more about protecting your energy in the sense of the ability for you to continue executing. So that energy, when I say that energy, that could be physical energy and emotional energy. Like for example, if you feel defeated, or if you want to protect that and make sure that energy level, it doesn't dip too low. Right? And you got to do certain things to that. And sometimes, for example, it would be, you're doing some physical activity on the physical side. And then on the emotional side, maybe your recipe is books, or maybe your recipe is going to church or mosque or whatever, where, you have that thing, or, some other thing where you can top up your emotional tank and keep going.
Fantastic. AJ, on that note, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about your amazing journey, about what has gone into building MarketCircle. And thank you also for talking to me about your thoughts for startup entrepreneurs. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.